Waiters and waitresses of Reddit, what is the most awkward couple date you have ever witnessed at work? A girl hit on me in front of her BF when I was serving. The BF walked off after staring her off and the girl awkwardly sat there alone for a while. I asked a girlfriend to take over her table, cause it was too awkward. I work at a dinner theater, and we usually do proposals where we set up a random draw where the winner comes up on the stage to win their prize, and are then surprised by their partner who proposes. It's usually sweet and makes everybody in the room all fuzzy and warm. This one guy wanted to take it further and requested to perform a song. He brought his own music and everything. We're pretty easygoing at this job, so we agree to let him do it. We do the fake draw. The woman comes up on stage in front of a room of 400 people, and the music starts to play. Apparently this guy was a little nervous, and he compensated by having a few drinks. So what follows is a slurred performance of a song written by this guy that seemed to focus on how he was sorry for cheating on this woman with her sister, and at the end of it, he gets down on one knee and proposes. Usually this gets a round of applause, encouraging the person to say yes, but not after that train wreck of a performance. The poor woman was just holding her face the entire time and starts shaking her head and says, "No, what's wrong with you?" She storms off and leaves him and our stage manager on stage to a bunch of murmuring from the audience. The only thing our stage manager can think of to say on mic is, "Well, that's that." The guy ended up staying for the rest of the show and had many more drinks. That was years ago and it still remains one of the cringiest things I've ever seen. First date, I would estimate college age. They're eating and the girl says, "I'm having a really nice time, but my friend just texted me and asked me if I wanted to hang out, and I said yes, so I actually have to go." Ouch. Couple came into the restaurant dressed very goth. I wasn't their server but I was running the cash register just a few feet away. They proclaimed to everyone that they were energy vampires, but not to fear them because they won't hurt us. They said they didn't need our food for sustenance, but enjoyed the tasted. After ordering the meal they then politely asked the waitress if she would stick around for a second so they could feed off of her aura so they could have enough energy for the night. The waitress said okay and gave me a side glance over her shoulder that I knew meant I better get a good tip for this. The couple clasped each other's hands, closed their eyes, and made sucking sounds for a solid minute before leaning back in the seats and sighing as if they had just had a turkey dinner. The waitress was indeed tipped well for her delicious energy. Late to the party but I will share my story. Had a couple come in one night and everything seemed to be going fine. We just hired a new server who was training and I asked her if she had any questions. She was still nervous about greeting tables so I told her she could shadow me and watch what I do. We go over to the couple's table and all I hear from the new server is, "You freaking B, I knew you were cheating on me." Turns out the guy was her BF on a date with his side chick and he didn't know she just got a job there. She didn't get fired for what she said. I hope she adopted that as her greeting for every table. When I was bartending this guy came into the bar on a weeknight. Average looking guy, late 20s. He sat down and asked for a drink and told me he was nervous because it was his first date in 3 years and they had met on Tinder. He arrived 20 minutes before her expected arrival to get rid of some of his nerves. 2 hours passed and he waited for her with no text or call explaining she would be late. This woman walks up to the guy and I'm thinking, wow, she really came. She looks at him and says, "Are you Joe?" The guy replies yes and gets up to properly greet her looking incredibly excited. She says no thanks and just leaves. What a foul creature. Joe, not his real name. And I proceeded to get way too drunk for a Tuesday. Poor average Joe. Way too drunk for a Tuesday. If God didn't want us to get blitzed on a Tuesday, he wouldn't have given us tequila to wash down our tacos. I worked at a fondue place. 1.5 2-hour meal for 2 people. 4 courses. The works. Couple came in and he had pre-arranged with us to present an engagement ring with a chocolate course with melted chocolate on the plate spelling "Will you marry me?" also roses and other embellishments on the plate. Apparently the entire meal she was explaining to him how bad he was at being in a relationship. Too needy, too emotional, somehow also didn't spend enough time with her and wasn't connecting with her. It was an hour-long breakup speech. We come around the corner with candles lit and the chocolate fondue and the engagement ring on the plate. The table next to them did everything they could to wave us off. I was holding a camera to capture the magical moment, which never came. He tried to get his prepared remarks out, but it was so bad we eventually left the dessert at the table and tried to act like nothing had happened. She left before the check came. Husband and wife fight. Wife cried. Husband got up and threw a pizza slice at her face. I cry about a lot of things, but if my BF threw a pizza in my face I'd be freaking livid. Date seemed going well, but the guy was nervous and fidgety. He was rocking back on his chair a little as he would talk and eventually flew too close to the sun, toppled his chair backwards and knocked himself out cold, and peed his pants. He had to be taken out of the dining room on a stretcher over the span of 20 minutes, while his Tinder date did the honorable thing and immediately went to the bar and ordered shots. We gave them to her on the house. Toppled his chair backwards and knocked himself out cold. Oh crap. And peed his pants. Oh crap. Well told, friend. I guess you could call this a couple date. I was working at a wine bar when a married couple sat down on a pretty slow night. I went over the specials and they ordered. Once appetizers came out, the man thought it would be a good idea to serve his wife divorce papers. I did my best to avoid that side of the bar. I did bring out tissues for the wife who was breaking down. I ended up boxing up the dinner. The guy paid, but I do not envy that ride home. This happened to someone I know. It was a complete surprise to her. He had never once mentioned divorce. Things seemed to be going okay between them. And then one night he took her out to dinner and told her he had already started the paperwork. They had been married something like 15 years too. Served a deaf couple having a fight. They went from both of them signing furiously to her crying and signaling to me for a stack of napkins for, I assumed, her tears. She whips out a pen and starts writing paragraph after paragraph angrily. It was awkward because I kept having to come back to the table since they ordered multiple courses and he was just eating and signing while she was hunched over the table writing away while crying. When they finally left they tipped me pretty well though, so I guess it wasn't too bad. I remember a deaf guy who used to have a bit of a chip on his shoulder. He'd kind of seek out the staff and make a big deal out of not being understood. Backfired when my friend served him, and signed really freaking well. According to her, he could barely sign at all and he just stood there awkwardly with the rug pulled out from under him. IDK if this counts, but when I was a waitress at Olive Garden, one of my tables was going over their divorce paperwork. When I greeted the table I asked how everyone was and the woman said, "Terrible. We are getting a divorce." Like WTF do I say to that? One of my first jobs in New York was managing a lounge cocktail bar in a high-end hotel. At around 3 or 4 o'clock, a guy that looked pretty cheesy, slicked back hair, bad suit etc., came up to me and demanded that he get that window table tonight for his date. He had a reservation for 8 p.m. I explained to him that I can't guarantee it etc and he slipped me $400 with the "how about now" look, in which I eventually caved in and told him that I'd take care of it. He then pulled another stack of hundreds and started counting them in front of me while asking if I could go a little extra by coming over to the table when he was there with the date and pretend that I knew him from a movie. At this point, if I've gone this far, why not? Sure enough, he rolled around later in the evening with a blonde bimbo, and after they'd had a glass of champagne I approached the tables around them, checked on how they were doing before going over to him and did the whole "how are you enjoying your evening?" and before walking off I did an Oscar-worthy double take with a "Are you, by any chance? You must be." At which point he had this douchy smile lapping up the recognition he was getting from this young dude he'd just paid off. Most importantly for him though, it worked. She was loving it, and they left shortly after and he slipped me another $600 on the way out. Was totally expecting him to be a douche and leave a crappy no tip on the bill. Guy might have acted like a douche, but at least he had the cash to support the act. Was a cocktail waitress at a bar in a high-end restaurant a couple years ago. This couple comes in right around peak hours. Guy looks annoyed. Girl looks really excited. The whole time the girl is trying to talk to this guy and he's completely ignoring her. He gets a call and talks on the phone for a good 10 minutes, hangs up and starts talking to anyone around him but her. He's getting more and more drunk and starts hitting on the female bartender and eventually the cocktail waitresses, myself included, telling us he could get us all much better jobs in Atlanta. The girl he's on a date with has started crying at this point, and once he actually notices, he yells at the bartender because it was obviously restaurant's fault for her being upset. She yells at him to stop yelling at the bartender because he's been such an awful date, and he goes off. Tells her he didn't even want to eat here. She should have picked a better place, and he isn't paying for her food and drinks. He then tells her that she didn't look fat in her picture and he wouldn't have asked her out if he'd known she was that big, probably met online kind of thing. She retreats to the bathroom and the guy continues to make a scene. Another girl at the bar and I go to check on her while the bartenders and manager try to deal with him. The girl is super upset and I tell her there's a back door she can leave through and I can get her tab from the bartender. I go back out and the guy had already stormed out and refused to pay, leaving his date with a nearly $200 check. She didn't have the money to pay, so a couple of the bar regulars covered it. Made the whole night super awkward and stressful. Definitely one of the more memorable experiences of that place. Bar regulars being bros. In law school I always worked the Sunday morning shift at the restaurant in town and it was always so dead, but I'd bring home work so it was mostly okay. Every other week, this couple would come in and order G&Ts and nachos and sit for hours talking about how attracted they were to each other, their sex life, and would joke about sneaking around and whatnot. I never thought much of it, until one day, I walked into the dining room from the kitchen and saw the lady had already been seated in a booth facing me. Her dude's bald head was across from her, facing away from me. I approached the table, about to ask the lovebirds if they wanted their usual, when the dude turned around and it was a different dude. The lady looked at me sheepishly as he mentioned to me it was his wife's birthday and they had never been at my restaurant before. LMAO. Like, how do you even react in such a situation? Really little guy, maybe 5'4", 120 pounds, comes in with a gigantic woman, probably 6 feet tall and easily 300 pounds. Both tatted the frick up with piercings to match. The woman orders her dish and before I get the guy's order, he says in a sexy voice, "I think you want more than that." She smirks at him, says, "You know I do," and orders 3 more entrees. This was clearly a thing for them. They seemed incredibly happy together and became regulars at my restaurant. I feel like I played a not insignificant role in this bizarre couple's eating fetish for like 3 years. There was a couple at my work having drinks. Girl went to the toilet, came back and admitted that she'd been sleeping with the guy's brother. Apparently glasses were thrown across the room and they both got kicked out. Lem do some lines before I lay this on him. I had a mid-40s man with a young and attractive mid-20s woman sitting at the bar. They were engaging in small talk and ordering drinks. Nothing out of the ordinary. After possibly 45 minutes a lady storms into the bar and immediately goes up to them. She grabs the man by the shoulder and says you're C, and walks out. The man turned to his perceived date and says yeah. She does that and then left the room, leaving his date to sit there, staring blankly into oblivion until she left. Odd. Kinky couples foreplay. Sucks for the random chick though, just a pawn in their naughty game. Not exactly a date, but I served a couple one time who had met up to discuss the terms of their divorce at the fancy-ish restaurant I worked at the time. They came before the dinner rush, so they were pretty much my only table, and every time I check in on them the wife was extremely angry, tearful, and they were bickering about holiday schedules for their daughter, timeshares, etc. It wasn't the end of the world, but it was extremely awkward to butt in to change out their forks or refill drinks while they were so emotionally charged. Seems like they were handling the situation much better than a lot of couples though. A girl brought 2 Tinder dates and played them off each other game show style. They seemed to be unaware this was what would happen. Splitting the bill was hilarious. I was really hoping you going to end it with the guys left her there and went over to the bar together. Was a bartender waiter a few years back and I was delivering some food to her table to find out that it was my ex and her new boyfriend sitting at the table. We had only stopped seeing each other a month earlier, so it was incredibly awkward for everyone. I'd say that she did it on purpose. I was at one of these fancy speakeasy type bars. They've started opening up, installing a new invoice printer for their point of sale system. Waiting for the printer firmware and driver to install can take 30 or 40 minutes on slower computers, so I'm people watching As I'm standing there watching bars fill up, I notice a gorgeous blonde in her late 20s is sitting with a very well manicured looking guy in his mid 40s. He's dressed like he just left a high dollar law firm, and she looks like she's going to a fancy professional cocktail party after their date. He is polite, talkative, and super into her, but you can tell that she isn't reciprocating the feelings. To be honest, by the look on her face, she's anywhere but in that bar at the moment. The guy goes to the bathroom and she quickly picks up her phone and frantically calls someone and begs for pickup ASAP. The gist of the call with the guy was her mother's co-worker and her mother had set the date up, and our girl really wasn't feeling it. About 15 minutes later, a guy around her age comes in, throws some cash on the table and excuses them. She cites some vague emergency and is escorted out. The older guy continues drinking. $140 tab. Note that I'm standing at their main cash register, and starts flirting with the waitress. Fails to get her number. Pays in exact change without tipping, and leaves. Dang, everybody had a bad night. This trashy couple I served were disgusting people to begin with, and to top it off the woman was trying to be sneaky and jerk him off under the table. Unfortunately I saw this happening and just pretended like nothing was happening because I didn't want to deal with it. When I was waitressing in college, I witnessed the single most embarrassing thing to happen to a person to date. Right in the middle of their dinner, and in the middle of our Friday night dinner rush, this poor guy stands up, taps his wine glass to get everyone's attention, and then proceeds to tell everyone what a fantastic person his GF is, how much he loves her, and how lucky he is to have her in his life. The whole time this is happening, she is just sitting there watching him with the most boring look on her face. It was so weird, kind of like, yeah, tell me something I don't know. Then poor guy pulls out a ring, gets on one knee and asks her to marry him. She gives him the most disgusted look imaginable and says, "This is the ring you expect me to say yes to? Are you retarded? Could you be any cheaper?" Then she gets up and walks out, leaving the poor guy just kneeling there. I didn't charge him for the meal. Bro, dodge a bullet there. Working at a Chili's on Valentine's Day, the girl gave me her number with her boyfriend in the bathroom. I came back and had to deal with her being sweet to him and nice the rest of the dinner. I did not call or text her, just was weird every time she'd look me in the eyes following. Oh heck, that just reminded me of a friend and a girl he was going out with. She was eyeing flirting with this other guy at bar. He got up and walked over to the guy, brought him back over to her, introduced them and walked out. No anger, no drama, just walked out. It was freaking hilarious to see it. Of course she chased after him apologizing. He dropped her that evening. Dear Reddit, what is your worst blind date experience? Kind of a blind date fail. I had just come back home from college and was having a night drinking at the local watering hole when I noticed the place had a new bartender. New attractive bartender. Short hair, nice tattoos that were clearly leading to interesting places and an electric six shirt. Frick, yes. So I start making a bit of conversation, and much to my surprise, we seem to really hit it off. And not just bartender is everyone's best friend until they leave hitting it off, but really cool conversation. She starts hinting at if I'm seeing anyone, and I say no, and she immediately reaches into her pocket and starts writing something down. On top is the number at the apartment, and these are directions. We're having a party on Wednesday night, and you should come. True enough, a phone number and directions. What would you think? Wednesday comes and I'm dressed up and ready to impress. I head over to her place, knock on the door, and there she is, looking amazing. She smiles and hugs me, grabs me by the hand and drags me through the party until she gets to this big dude. Jonas. This is my roommate Jeff. Jeff. This is Jonas. I do the whole pleasantry thing, but when I turn around, she's gone. I mean, poof, gone. Like Batman. Not knowing anyone else, I just keep on talking to Jeff. Seems like a good guy. Suddenly he stops me mid-sentence and says, "You're not gay, are you?" No. You should really tell Liz that. She had apparently set up the entire part as an excuse to hook me up with her roommate. I had been on a blind date with a dude and didn't even know. Poor Jeff. I wonder how many times he's been put through that. I got set up with the daughter of one of my parents' friends. I wasn't really looking forward to it, but I was on break from college, and she apparently went to school not far from me, so it wasn't like a lost cause summer romance type thing. They showed me pictures and said nice things about her. I picked her up from her parents' place. We were both home for the summer and was a little surprised by how pretty she was. The pictures had been from when she was in high school and didn't do her justice. The date was dinner and a movie. Dinner went really well. We had a lot in common. She was very grounded and down to earth. Cared about the environment. If I have a type, she was it. So as we're walking to the movie theater, I slipped my arm around her waist. She pushed me away and got all serious. I'm really sorry, because you seem like a nice guy, but I'm a lesbian. I just went out with you to make my parents happy. Sitting through the Chronicles of Narnia with her was the most awkward 2 hours of my life. I once went on a date with a girl and this is how the conversation went. Her: so what's your favorite book? Me: tough, but when I was little I loved Jurassic Park. Her: yuck, Jurassic Park. Me: the book or the movie? Everybody loves Jurassic Park. Her: I don't believe in dinosaurs. Me: fossils. Her: I don't want to get into it but I think fossils are bulls. I ended the conversation there and held on to the night. Until later on she told me, I don't believe in outer space and my head freaking exploded. I wasn't feeling great, but decided to meet anyway. We met at a Belgian beer bar. She was gorgeous, fun, and totally into me. I felt a gas pain, so I leaned forward slightly to quietly relieve the pressure. I completely and explosively shat myself. The odor was immediate. I excused myself to the bathroom, but the damage was too great. I walked out of the bathroom, muddy panted, out of the bar, and boarded the train for home. The date was nothing compared to the horror of the following 3 weeks, recovering from E. coli. Oh my god. Somebody put crap in my pants. I was set up by a friend when I was 16. He took me to the movies, at the mall, and awkwardly tried to maquillate. Then we sat in the food court and he asked my honest opinion of him, which I mumbled something typical like you seem nice. Without invitation he then delved into what he thought of me, which was attractive but could be really hot if I lost 5-10 pounds. Then he left me for a bit, which was weird, and returned with a lovely gift, a creepy puppet. Some people's learning curves are steeper than others. I've only been on one blind date a few years ago. It was with the investment banker son of one of my mother's friends. One of her attempts at finding me a respectable boy from a good family. So that night he calls to ask if I could pick him up instead since his car broke down. I thought, no problem, and asked where he lived. The guy was staying at a buddy's place an hour from my house. Ugh, but still no problem I thought. So I get dressed in my cutest little black dress and heels to channel the grace of Audrey Hepburn and, gosh darn it, I think I did well. I pick the guy up and he's not all bad. A little on the short side but he has a cute face and seems fit. So we get to the restaurant and order. He gets a few drinks into him and we have a conversation about job stuff blah blah, but then it arrived at who we admired. His answer? Patrick Bateman from American Psycho. Just, you know, without the killing and stuff. He said he admired the character and aspired to live that kind of life. Without the killing of course. Ding ding ding. The alarm bells were going off in my head. So trying to change the subjects I mentioned the frat that he was in. We both went to the same university and that I knew some of the guys. He then proceeds to tell me that, yeah, all his friends were just vehicles for him to get ahead in life and that he didn't really like any of them. Oh look. Then comes the check. He forgot his wallet. So I paid. Just awesome. By now I was just looking for this night to be done with. But no, things had to get more fun. On the way back to the garage we pass by an alley and he leans in and whispers into my ear and says, you're freaking hot and I want to frick you behind that pile of garbage, and he licks my ear. WRR blashold for car do not want. I tell him the night is over, gave him some money, and said that he could take the public transportation home. I then called my friends and went out to a bar to drink the experience away. Needless to say I was jumpy for a few days, expecting an axe to come out from a corner at any moment. Read that like a horror story. You mentioned the alley. I screamed, don't go in there. As I read the original post a thought occurred to me. What if she was completely underwhelmed with you and decided screw it, I'll eat with my hands tonight, just to see what she could get away with? I'm sure that's not the case, but I couldn't shake the thought. Man, that's an awesome idea. I am in a long-term relationship, but I wanna start blind dating now just for the social experiment. I should really be working, but I cannot resist typing up this story. 3-4 months ago I was talking to a girl on a Cupid. Things were going pretty well and we decided to get together. I was on a budget because I was saving to move out of the country, so I suggested a local Thai place which had $0.25 sent beers with an entree, figuring the food was pretty decent and the cheap beer wouldn't hurt. I offered to pick her up but she declined, which is completely respectable. The night of the date I'm running about 5 minutes late and feeling a bit rushed when I get a call from her. Even though I gave her an exact address in an easy to find place in town, she's having trouble getting there. She ends up calling me back 6-7 times in the next 45 minutes as she tries to find her way there. No advice I could give was helping this girl. By this point I've already been there 30+ minutes and I'm about 3/4 of the way through my first beer. Red flags about how incompetent this girl must be are going crazy, but I'm already on the ride. The final time she calls me she says, "Hey, is there parking lot?" to which I reply, "No, it's all street parking." But there were a lot of open spots when I parked. She then replies, "I don't know how to parallel park." Mind you, this is a city. Parallel parking is a way of life. I'm pretty dumbfounded that she doesn't possess this skill. This is already a nightmare in my mind, and as I sit there pondering how to solve it, she asks if I would mind coming out to park her car. I agree and start walking outside, being a bit embarrassed at having to explain that I'll be right back to the hostess. I walk outside and a few minutes later she pulls up. First of all, this girl was not as advertised. I got my space angled hard. I'm not someone who needs the perfect girl, but I'm telling you this was out of control. I climb into the driver's seat and the first thing I say is how weird it is. I tell her I haven't driven anything but a manual in 3 years and her automatic feels very strange. I slowly accelerate and head down the block. About 3/4 of the way down I see an open spot. I let off the gas and instinctively go to push in the clutch. Instead, I stomped the brake hard. This girl had quite a lot of mass and wasn't wearing a seatbelt. Any physics student knows what happened next. Her head flies forward and nails the dashboard. I start apologizing like crazy, and luckily she wasn't hurt. We spent the next hour having a really awkward dinner and then parted ways. No, we didn't call each other. TD. Girl asks me to park her car. It's an automatic and I drive a manual. I hit brake instead of clutch, slamming her head into the dashboard. More like take this fatty slams brakes. Another OkCupid chick. We talked for a few times. The photos were small and blurry, but I got the basic idea, at least enough to set up a date since she lived about 10 blocks away. She was about 24 at the time and I was 28. We meet at a bar and while she isn't fat, she is more plump than her profile led on, but all in all, not anywhere near as bad as some of the girls discussed here. I knew nothing was going to come of it but had nothing else to do that night, so I figured I could have some drinks and hit the sack before midnight. Almost as soon as we met, she suggests we start taking shots of whiskey. This girl could drink. Over the course of a couple of hours she probably had a half dozen shots of whiskey and several mixed drinks. During the process she liked to discuss how much she loved giving BJs and how she was. I guess she had self-esteem issues. I dunno. I was plastered, like blind drunk. By the time we are ready to leave, I don't remember going to my apartment, but I remember we ended up on my couch with a movie on as I faded in and out of consciousness and she raided my liquor cabinet. What happens next would have landed me in jail if the roles were reversed. First, I wake up to her on my lap. She is sitting facing away from me, grinding her, still in dress and panties, crotch against my jeans and stumbling about during the process. Then things go black again. I wake up again and this time it is to a BJ. I might have been drunk, but I remember a good BJ and this chick was giving a great deep throat, gagging BJ like only a drunk girl and or punster can. Then things go black again. I wake up again and now she has my pants around my knees. She had removed her panties and squatting over me, fricking me with no condom. I remember being totally freaked out by that, but not as freaked out as when she removed her bra and a dusting of dead skin fell out of the cups and onto my black shirt. I literally threw her off of me as I stood up and ran to the bathroom with my pants around my ankles. puking my guts out into the toilet. When I got back from the bathroom I was slightly sobered up and she was sitting on the couch masturbating. She asked if we could finish fricking and I said no, but she could finish me with a BJ if she wanted to. I honestly don't remember if I came or not because I passed out again. When I woke up the next morning she was gone and I never replied to another one of her text or OkCupid messages again. Whoa, that bra removing part of the story is one of the nastiest things I have ever heard in my life. I'm going to post a couple of these. I was set up with a friend of my roommate's girlfriend. Let's call the date Lisa and let's call the roomies GF Karen. I knew what she looked like so I knew there was an attraction but I had never spoken with her. We met outside of the restaurant and Lisa was on her cell phone. I figured it must have been important but as we walked in and waited for the table she kept talking about stupid crap, clearly on the phone with a BFF about nonsense. She gets off the phone, doesn't apologize and we get seated. About 2 minutes later her phone rings again and it is the same OMG, no way crap conversations. The waitress comes over and we order drinks. While she is still on the phone and I twiddle my thumbs. The drinks come. Lisa is still on the phone. I'm 1 stroke too done my drink and have waved the waitress off once already because Lisa is still on the phone. Finally about 20 minutes into it I quietly stand up. Take $20 out of my wallet and walk out without saying a word. As I'm walking out I see Lisa's eyes widen to the size of dinner plates, her mouth opened wide and her face turning red in embarrassment. All of the surrounding tables had seen what transpired and were whispering to themselves about it. By the time I got home, my date Lisa was on the phone with Karen who was over at our house at the time. It didn't occur to me until now that my date was probably on the phone with Karen the whole time. Karen was P. As soon as I walked through the door she started attacking me with "You are such an butthole. Why would you just leave her there and not say anything?" I looked her dead in the eyes and calmly replied I didn't want to interrupt such an important phone call and then walked into my room and went to bed. As I was leaving the living room I noticed the same expression on her face that Lisa had when I left the restaurant. Side note, fast forward about 6 months and Lisa and I wound up being frick buddies for a while. So everyone won in the end. So I was going to school in New Jersey. The school that I was attending had about a 15:1 guy to girl ratio, so you can imagine how much fun those parties were. So getting pretty desperate for female attention, I turned my sights to a couple of online dating sites. After a few weeks, I set my sights on one girl that I had talked to a few times through the site. We decided to get together after quite a bit of flirting. I should mention at this point that I was aware from the beginning that she had 3 kids. I took caution to this, but figured since I wasn't long for New Jersey, as to just take this as a sign that she was sexually active. I should also mention that the town I was living in New Jersey was a heckhole that didn't house a single attractive, or even moderately attractive woman within a 30-mile radius. So I drive about 30 minutes to this bar in her hometown the next Friday to meet her. I run into her almost immediately. I assess the situation. She's got a cute face and a nice rack. She has a few extra pounds on her, but not to any point where I would call her fat. We have quite a few drinks while chillin', playing shuffleboard, talking to her ex-lesbian lover. Another story maybe. We decide to leave the bar a few hours later. She suggests going back to the apartment, which I assume is hers. More to come on that. Before we do though, she grabs a 12-pack of Michelob Ultra, blah, from the bar's cooler and tells me to walk. Like this a normal thing in this heckhole that is Bloomington, New Jersey. We get to the apartment and start drinking the beer. Conversation dies down pretty quick, so I just throw it out there, being that I am drunk. Wanna have sex, not the classiest moment of my life, but it worked so I'm not embarrassed about it. She takes me by the hand and go to the bedroom. She take off her pants, I take off mine, and we start going at it. A few minutes in, we hear the front door open. Immediately, she tells me to stop and pretend I'm sleeping. I'm all what the frick, the door to the room opens, and the light turns on. All I can hear is oh what the frick. I peek over my shoulder and see a girl and a very large guy standing in the doorway looking shocked. The guy is freaking out, and the girl is trying to calm him down, telling him it's okay. I'm dead. I know it. This is how my life is going to end. The only thing that saves me is when he takes the girl and throws her to the ground. This pisses her off more than I have ever seen another person pee, and he immediately starts apologizing to her as they leave the room. I jump out of bed, throw my pants back on and sprint out the door. I later find out that it was her sister's playroom, and she was living with her boyfriend. A boyfriend who very well could play linebacker for the Dallas Cowboys. Scariest moment of my life, and worst blind date experience. Frick, I'm from New Jersey and I don't even know where Bloomington is. TLDR, blind date turned out to be a surprise couch masturbator. I met a couple through a mutual friend and we hang out for a bit one night. Have a decent time. I spend a couple days afterwards texting back and forth with the wife of the couple, thinking hey, new friend. She eventually starts talking up this friend of hers, Gary, and it is clear she wants to set us up on a date. Okay, I think. I'm newly single again after 5 years of bad relationship. We'll see how this goes. She describes him as football player build, not being a sports person. Does not occur to me I should have asked her to clarify. Would he be a quarterback or lineman, for instance? Anyhow, I meet Gary for coffee downtown. Suffice it to say he is a substantial man. But I think hey, I'm not perfect either, I'll give him a shot. We have an okay time over coffee, talking about regular random small talk topics. He walks me back to my place, but the night is still young and he suggests hanging out and watching some Futurama. So I invite him up. As soon as we are sitting down, he starts talking about his ex and all the drama she brought into his life, and it slowly comes to light that they may not be actually broken up. He is just seeing what else is out there. HRM. At this point I'm more than over the date and I'm ready for him to get out of my apartment. So I go to the restroom and plan on feigning illness upon my return. Turns out he gave me an even better excuse to give him the heave-ho. I return from the bathroom only to find him on my couch, masturbating furiously. I freak out, ask him what he is doing, and he says what does it look like and makes a motion for me to come join him. I was kind of at a loss at this point and I think all I did was say something about how he needs to leave. He removes his hand from inside his pants. Did I mention he was wearing sweatpants? Shrugs, and exits. I never heard from him or the woman who introduced me to him again. That's dangerously close to the naked man technique from How I Met Your Mother. The idea is that you would be so surprised by what you saw that you'd have sex with him simply out of respect for doing something so bold. That's a brave man, there. Holy crap, mine doesn't even compare to that. Once went on a date with a guy from work, bad idea, who took me to Dave & Buster's, for one, an arcade. For those who don't know, during the meal, he said all of the following. I have a short attention span and can't date a single girl for over 3 months. I want to become a professional video game player. I want to train to be a professional eater. I don't want to work a day in my life. I just want to play paintball. He was 23 years old, and I was 20. Even I knew this was childish nonsense. Later on at the movie, he asked if I would pay for our tickets because he ran out of money on our $25 dinner at the arcade. How to make all of these sound better. I am super adventurous and love trying new things. I want a job where I rely on my ability to perform things quickly and accurately. I would love to be a food critic someday. I enjoy spending a lot of my time outdoors playing sports. I went on a blind date 2 years ago with a guy one of my good friends set me up with. He just started university at USC and was majoring in political science. I thought he sounded pretty smart from what my friend told me and agreed. We met at Laguna Beach and had dinner at the Greeters restaurant, which is this cute little place that doesn't have the best decor, but has good food with large portions. It was fine at first because he was cute and we had some things in common like music and traveling. It wasn't until he started mentioning that he was a die-hard Republican and did not support gay marriage and abortions and IVF babies. I'm an IVF baby, and it's a sore subject because my mom tried so hard to have a baby with my dad and it wasn't until she tried IVF that she had me. Stupidly, I asked him what did he have against IVF babies. He immediately spews on and on that IVF babies are nothing more than objects of status to their parents, that it violates the rights of the child, depriving him of his true relationship with his parents and can hinder the maturing of his personality, etc. By this point, I was done with the date and just nodded along to whatever he said. After he paid the check, he drove me home and walked me to the front door. I unlocked it and then turned around to say goodnight when he leaned in with his tongue already out. I didn't know what to do, so I tilted my head so he would hit my cheek. Worst feeling ever of tongue licking your face. When I went inside, he looked at me shocked and asked if I was going to invite him in. When I told him no, he got pee and said that I paid for your freaking dinner by then. I just wanted to drink a bottle of wine by myself, so I took $10 out of my wallet, threw it in his face and closed the door. Worst blind date ever. I liked the $10 in the face part. When I was very young, probably around 12 or 13, an older friend of mine asked me if I wanted to go to a shop with him. I said I didn't have any problems with it and happily went along. On the way there he said he was meeting up with a girl and asked if I'd mind talking to her sister. Her sister was severely handicapped and in a wheelchair. Of course I didn't find this out until I met her. The girl then decided she didn't like me and proceeded to insult me. Based on your username, I would think you guys have at least one thing in common. College years. Set up on a date with a nice girl who was totally in love with her next door neighbor, who wanted to be a Catholic priest. One and done. Ouch. About 9 years ago I was bored and unsure where to meet new people after ending a 4-year relationship, so I decided to give online dating a try. It seemed like a great idea. Eventually I start emailing this awesome guy. His messages are laced with genuine wit and charm. He's good looking, he's smart, well educated and makes me laugh. Everything seems fantastic and eventually we meet at a coffee shop. He looks even better than his photo. Score. He has a great smile and is as tall as he said he was. Everything was super amazing great. As we sit at the coffee shop we make small talk and I notice he is starting to sweat. Not a little nervous sweat, but I just ran a freaking marathon sweat. I ask him if he's just worked out to make conversation and he spends the next hour detailing all of his mental health and medical problems, including his glandular problems, explosive temper, anxiety and jealousy. He looks around nervously and mentions that his ex has a restraining order against him and that he's afraid she just walked by the coffee shop. He asks me to meet him a few blocks away so he doesn't get arrested. I just gathered up my bag, walked straight to my car and drove away without even a goodbye. Thanks Match.com. She was mean to the waitress. It was bizarre. There's not much else to tell. It was just an incredibly awkward experience. I went back and tipped the waitress double under the guise of using the restroom. A date being rude to her server is a huge turn off. What's the worst first date you've ever been on? I met a girl on OkCupid. She seemed pretty down to earth and we had a lot in common. We chatted for several days through IM and emails and I asked her if she would like to meet up and get dinner. She agreed and all of a sudden she turned into Captain Needy Pants. The 2 days leading up to the date should have been my automatic red flag. She texted me constantly and would say things like I can't wait to see you. At first I thought it was cute, but after like 5 texts in one day saying the same thing, I thought she was getting a little out of control. I almost cancelled the date because I was getting such mega creeper vibes, but I decided not to. She shows up at the place we agreed to meet up at, and she looks way hotter than her pictures. She is gorgeous. She might have been one of the most attractive girls I have been out with. The date starts off pretty good and we are having good conversation. I started thinking maybe she was just genuinely excited to meet me, and then, about 25 minutes into the date, she reintroduces the crazy side of herself. The first thing she said was, "So, what are we doing tomorrow night?" and I was not sure how she meant it, so I was laughed and said, "I'm sorry, I have plans tomorrow night." Well, this apparently was the wrong answer. She slams down her fork and she says, "You are going out with some other S tomorrow, aren't you?" I wasn't even sure what to say, so I squinted my eyes a little and leaned my ear towards her and said, "Excuse me?" The next 5 minutes are still a mystery to me of what actually happened, but she went on a rant, at almost yelling volume. She proceeded to chew me out about how I was a horrible boyfriend, and how all she wanted in life was for me to love her. I finally was able to get a word in edgewise and said, "I am not your boyfriend. This is our first date. What the frick is wrong with you?" I get the bill from the waiter, just hand him $60 and start to leave. She follows me out and tries to stop me, and I am like, "I am sorry, but I need to go." She starts crying and she grabs my arm and will not let go, and at some point she is actually on the ground with a death grip around my leg begging me to give her another chance. I finally break free and get to the parking deck and drive away. She is standing at the exit to the deck with tears streaming down her face and she is screaming something at me. I rolled up all the windows so I couldn't hear her. I drove away and was so thankful that date was over. She continued to blow up my phone for the next week and a half. On the following day, I had almost 30 missed calls from her and over 50 text messages. I finally had the number blocked by Verizon and the drama stopped. I'm totally thankful she didn't know where I lived because I am sure she would have stalked the crap out of me. I just finished reading Assholes Finish First by Tucker Max, and I am immediately reminded of a portion of his book. I am paraphrasing. If there's one thing you need to know about dating women, it's this. 1. Hot. 2. Single. 3. Sane. Pick 2. Of course, like a lot of his book. This is a gross exaggeration. Still doesn't make it less funny and true on some level. I've told this story on Reddit before, but here goes. So I met this girl on the internet, and she seemed really nice and down to earth. We had a lot in common, including our hobbies and politics and stuff like that, so I was thinking we might hit it off. We agreed to meet up in person at a Kaladi Brothers coffee place. Now bear in mind that I'm not super attractive, so up to this point she hasn't seen any pictures of me. Instead we have pre-arranged recognition signals. She walks in the door and I spot her by her clothing instantly and start waving. She gets a sort of uncertain look on her face and walks over and says Sam, and when I say yes she just says haha. No one walks out. Feels bad. Second edit, or the blind. Thanks for the suggestions. On my first date with this girl I excuse myself to use the bathroom. She gets up and follows me, making flirtatious remarks along the way. I think nothing of it, assuming she needed to use the restroom too and was just making small talk. I walk inside the men's restroom and she walks straight in with me. So I says to Mabel, I actually do need to use the restroom. Oh, I'll watch. No. Just number. I was not able to pee in public for a while after that. Clearly she thought the date was going better than you did. Within the first 5 minutes, guy told me he killed his dog by leaving it in the hot car for 12 hours. When he realized I was horrified, he tried to pass it off as a joke. I left immediately. Blind date, arranged by a mutual friend. I get there, she's already eating appetizers. I'm 10 minutes early. Then she orders the most expensive dinner on the menu and tells me she did it because she knows I'm paying. The small talk fails and for 45 minutes she complains about how no one is refilling her wine glass. She kills the glass every 20 seconds. She mentions how she was told that I make a decent salary multiple times. I try to be civil and change the subject. Awkward conversational topics ensue. Nothing even close to first date etiquette follows. 3/4 of the way through I go to the bathroom and our waiter walks by, asks me if we are doing a reality show or something along those lines. Since he has seen this disaster in motion, we talk about how wild this woman is for about 5 minutes and then I ask him to stop at our table and ask about the bill. I immediately say split checks and give him $80. Roughly 40 for my bill and 40 for his tip. The date looked shocked and ended up not being able to pay her bill. So the friend who hooked us up got a call and flipped the rest of her check. Her total came to be about $75. Last blind date ever. I'm glad to see you were quick enough not to cover her dumb butt. I went to college at Creighton in Omaha, NE. This was nice because it was near an airfield, so even insecure, slightly chubby women like myself had a chance at a date. I met an Air Force guy with all American blue collar looks at a bar called Guitars and Cadillacs. That should have been my first clue, yeah? So on a Saturday, Airman Joe Blow or whatever says he'll pick me up from my dorm at 7. I get a call at 7:30 from him saying that while he was at a gas station, some lady bumped into his car and somehow shattered the window of his 1994 Camaro. Warning, warning. So he goes back to the base to pick up his friend's car, a Plymouth K car with plastic for the passenger side window. We go to a movie. We hit up a Taco Bell for dinner. Mind you, I am not particular about big money dates, but when the conversation is waning between discussing the movie Face Off and a person's favorite vodka, I start to get fidgety. After Taco Bell, he's driving me back to the dorm when he pulls over into a gravel parking lot, puts the car in park, and grabs me for the wettest, most intrusive kiss I've ever experienced. Of course, my head has been pushed back onto the plastic framing the window, and I've used enough force to back away from the sweat attack that my head pops through the plastic sheeting. Gahhhhh, I say, "What are you doing? I thought you would be into it," he says as he wipes saliva off his cheek. I say, I think you better just take me back home. He says, "My dong is seriously 9 inches long." I say, "Get me back to the dorm right now, please." The nice thing was that the wind blowing through the plastic sheeting made it nearly impossible to have a conversation on the way home, and this would be my worst date ever. Double date with a girl from college and 2 nerds. The girl who had asked me out was kind of a swervy driver and didn't seem to have driven much before that night. Literally 5 seconds before pulling into our parking space, the girl in the backseat threw up mid-sentence. She threw up all over her feet and clothes and all over the floor. To make matters worse, the car did not belong to my date but was just a loaner. I spent the night helping clean the car out. This date wasn't strange, but the circumstances regarding the sex sure was. I was dating this girl when I was 21 and she was 18. She still lived with her parents, and at the time I was living with a friend and his family. This didn't give us a whole lot of room for privacy, so we hooked up whenever and wherever we could. My aunt lived in the next town, and we had a pretty good relationship. She didn't mind if I brought a girl over to her house to have sex, especially since she was rarely at home. It's a Friday night and I call my aunt on the phone to ask her if I could use her place for the evening. But she of course had no problem with it, but said I had to get the key from my cousin, her son. No problem. I pick up my girlfriend, drive about 30 minutes to the pool hall where my cousin was hanging out, got the key from him, then head over to the house. I assumed no one was home since they all usually go out on Friday nights, so we made our way to the back bedroom. This was the biggest bed in the house, and one we had used before. I opened the door and see 2 old people sleeping. Dang. I told my girl that was my grandparents, so we had to use the twin bed. We made our way to the other bedroom and proceeded to pound away. When it was over, we lay there in the afterglow. We didn't want to leave, but she had to be home and it was another 30-minute drive back to her place. I get up, get dressed, and go out into the living room. There is an old man there that I didn't know. This wasn't unusual as my aunt would usually have people at her house that I didn't know. We exchanged greetings and I told him I was my aunt's nephew. He said that he was diabetic and that he had to get up to get something to eat. My girlfriend had finished dressing. We said goodbye to the old man and headed out the door. As we were walking out the door, a car pulled into the driveway. I didn't recognize the person, but waved anyway, got in the car, then drove away. All the time, this guy was just staring at us. Drove to take my girlfriend home, then drove all the way back to give the key back to my cousin. I walk up to him and he says, "I gave you the wrong key." "What do you mean you gave me the wrong key?" I said. "You gave me the key for the house over on Smith Street." "I know," he said. "We don't live there anymore. We live over on Turner Street now." "What do you mean you don't live there anymore?" "I was just there." "Who lives there now?" I asked. "Heck if I know," he replied. "We moved last week." This would explain the strange couple in the bedroom and the strange looks from the guy pulling into the driveway. Since the house was small and only had 2 bedrooms, I figured that we must have had sex on his bed. It's a good thing I was, sadly, quick on the draw back then. I can't imagine what would have happened if he wouldn't have walked in on 2 strangers going at it on his bed. TLDR. Had sex in a stranger's house. Whoa. I'm sure my girlfriend will tell you it's with me. At the time I like to go on long walks to clear my head, and my favorite place to go was walking through the woods. I always went out for a walk at night time, so I had gotten used to walking through the woods at night, and I really enjoyed it. I still do. There's something serene and peaceful there in the darkness and silence. Anyway, after a relatively successful evening, watching Yes Man in the cinema, and chilling out in the arcade, I opted to walk her home. She accepted. Yes. 1 point. I then offered to take her my usual route, and I told her it was through the woods. I wanted to show her why I liked it so much. No doubt I came across as some sort of rapist. She still doesn't let me hear the end of it. "John, on our first date you tried to take me through the woods at midnight." Fair enough. Even I see her point. What on earth was I thinking? Still together though. She must have liked me. We went to see the high school's version of American Idol. He was 15 minutes late. I had to save our seats, and I had to buy his ticket. When he finally got in, he clenched my hand in a sweaty grip throughout the entire night, while shaking nervously. It was cute. Whatever. He kept making awkward conversation and tried to make me laugh, which I tried to do, politely. Afterward, we walked out of the building to where his mom was picking him up. He kissed me on the forehead, hard. Oh, high school. I brought a girl back to my house for dinner and a movie. I had previously made a bet with her wherein if she won, I'd make her dinner and bake pie, but if I won she had to make out with me. Either way, win-win, right? So we finish dinner and go back into my bedroom to watch a movie. Midway through the flick, she says, "I'm still a bit hungry. I think I'll go grab a quick bite of the leftovers." She gets up and goes into the kitchen. I decide about 45 seconds later, as my stomach rumbles, that this sounds like a great idea. I arrive in the kitchen to see her standing over my silverware drawer, emptying it into her purse. I was shocked. I'd never had a date try to rob me before. I asked, "What the heck are you doing?" Her reply, "Giggle oopsie, I'd have been pee already," but the girly giggling BS answer just put me over the edge. I walked up, looked in her bag, and saw that she'd only managed to grab some of the crappier silverware so far. At that point, I reached over to the counter and grabbed a slice of the pie. I looked her in the eyes and said, "Don't forget your dessert then." While holding her gaze, I dropped the pie into her purse and smashed it up as best I could with the sides of the purse to make sure it got in there nice and good. Kicked her out. Never saw her again. I was set up on a blind date with an aerobics instructor. I'm tall, lean, and fit myself. I'd recently smashed my Honda sedan, my fault, and was temporarily driving an old pickup instead. She spent the date telling me how much better she could do than with me. The feeling was mutual. Dating this girl who I later realized was pretty much using me to buy her stuff. I took her out to dinner and surprised her with concert tickets to Jerry Cantrell of Alice in Chains. She was excited, but then proceeded to spend most of the rest of dinner on the phone telling her friends. Kinda rude, but no big deal. Fast forward to the night of the show. I take her to dinner and she acts icy cold. Barely makes conversation and shrugs me off every time I try to make conversation. Take the SkyTrain down to the venue. Doesn't want me to touch her at all. Pulls away at incidental contact, even. We get to the venue, go inside, and I buy us a couple of drinks. She curtly thanks me for the drink and then says she'll be right back. I grab my drink and head to the stage, where I see her talking to some other guy. It becomes very clear quite quickly that they're together, or at least have been before. So I walk up and say, "There you are. What's up?" She replies, "Oh, it's you. Hi, this is my friend." He gives me a nod and a look that pretty much says it all. They're together, and I've been played like a freaking fiddle. So now I'm in this horrible situation. Jerry Cantrell goes on stage in 30 minutes, and I'm gonna have to either A, go home now, wallowing in misery, or B, stay and see the show, knowing this goddamn W is enjoying it with her fuck toy, less than 20 feet from me. Frick. So, I do what any other Alice in Chains fan would do. I get stinking drunk on whiskey and beer, and sloppily dance mosh for the next 2 hours, trying to ignore that stinging feeling every time I see her grinding on the scumbag. The show was great, and the crowd was awesome, minus the two, so that was a plus. I went home as soon as Jerry left the stage, said eat crap to the girl on the way out, and pretty much drunkenly sobbed on the ride home. Freaking pathetic. But at least I learned a lesson about how evil some girls can be, and learned to protect my heart more closely in the future. Worst date I've ever been on. Worst. Best heck. I don't even know. Picked a girl up from her house and walk into the nearby neighborhood district to pick out a restaurant to eat at. Jokingly, I said McDonald's. Frick it. I love McDonald's. She said, "If we go there, I am breaking up with you." I couldn't stand something like that. So thus we went to McDonald's. Not a single frick was given that day. I'm sure you know the game, girls. People in general always play where they want to go get something to eat, but then they want you to decide where to go. I always just say McDonald's and let it linger. They will always figure out somewhere they actually want to go after that. I have a bit of a nerd fetish, so awkward dates kind of come with the territory. The worst was when I went out with a co-worker friend. We were flirty but nothing serious. He was so nervous he brought his roommate so he wouldn't have to go alone. He was 28. Sad part is that I would have stuck around were it not for roomie Mick third wheel. Like I said, nerd fetish. Thank you for existing. My worst date was way back in 6th grade. Even though girls thought I was cute then, which I actually didn't know until late high school, I was a super shy geeky kid who played tons of computer games and Legos. But late one night, after a school dance where I slow dancing with one of the most popular girls, her friend called me up. In the most typically cute middle school awkward conversations between the girl's friend and the girl, we became boyfriend and girlfriend. So we set up a first couples date that next Friday to go to the park, maybe the mall, etc. At that time, I started playing the PC game MechWarriors 4, so I was obsessed with MechWarriors. I love them so much that I, poorly, drew battle matches all the time. So, being the cute but shy and totally inexperienced 11-year-old, I had the bright idea of spending the day drawing battle matches at the park. I showed her my pictures of a Mad Cat MK2, what a Gauss cannon looks like and how it works. Just the nerdiest 6th grader crap you could possibly think of. For 2 hours I basically forced the poor girl to try and make up the best battle match with the best weapons. And though she was trying to get us to go to the mall, I wanted to show off my drawing skills and my knowledge of MechWarrior. During the date, I thought I was the hottest crap in the world. The date ended with her making an excuse to leave and me thinking nailed it. The next day I was met with awkward looks and stares, and finally a classmate told me that the girl I took on the date thought I was a creeper nerd and I was made fun of for the rest of the year as the unpopular geek who was obsessed with robots. There wasn't even an official breakup either. Though on a happy note, I learned how to break dance over that summer and became the most popular guy in school for all of 7th grade. Middle school. You should call her up sometime and remind her that you're still going out. One night in the 8th grade, I finally got the balls to ask this girl out. She so happened to be a friend of my best friend's current girlfriend, so we decided to make it a double date. During the movie everything was going as planned. I sat by her while my friend sat with his girlfriend. Then we see a couple of her bitchy girlfriends walk into the theater, and so happened to see the girl I was with right away. She then motioned with her hand for her friends to come over here. When her friends got to where we were sitting, the girl I asked out turned to me and asked, "Can you scoot down a seat so I can sit next to my friends?" I said sure. So I got up and just walked out of the theater. And to add insult to injury, she stayed there and her friends ate the popcorn I bought. We were 14. Didn't know what the frick to do about women. So I took this one girl to Subway on Valentine's Day for some sandwiches. It was freezing out, with 5 feet of snow. She brought her friend. For the whole meal I talked about the benefits of Subway. We walk back. On the way, her friend kicks a piece of plastic. For some stupid reason, I don't know if it was stress or whatever, I thought it'd be awesome to jump up and down on this piece of plastic while grunting. I crap you not. That's what I did to try and impress my date. I destroyed a helpless piece of plastic, then kicked it onto the road. I still cringe to this day and I'm trying to black it out. It was very violent, yet for some reason, this chick still dug me. She talked about how cold her hands were the whole way back. At the time, having so little experience, I didn't understand the signals of her wanting to hold my hand. We got back to school, said goodbye, and we were forever awkward around each other for the rest of our high school careers. I am not sure if this counts as a date or not, but after my roommates and I found a free kitty on Craigslist, we decided to adopt it. We went out to the guy's house, and my roommate brought her BF. The guy giving away the cat was only doing so because he still lived with his dad, as an adult over 20, but his dad was getting remarried and the new wife was allergic to cats, so they made him give it away. This is all fine and good, but the creeper part comes in when he takes the cat, still in the cage, and proceeds to talk to it in an extremely high voice. telling it how much he loved it and would never forget it. This is also okay. A little strange but okay. But then he proceeds to lament about how he is losing his only friend and about how he can never get a girlfriend, and asks us about our relationship status. My roommate pipes up and says her BF is waiting in the car, but I am more than single and also looking. At this point, the guy is like a freaking falcon diving down on a mouse. He grabs my hand, kisses it in the most awkward and wet way possible, and asks me out on a date. He also asks for my number and to keep him updated on his precious baby, about how he likes to draw on DeviantArt and about how his drawings are art and not traced. He gives me his account name and asked me to look him up, followed by asking my phone number. I decide to give him the number to Time, my friend, with a huge troll grin on her face, loads the cat into the car, and we leave. He blows me a kiss as we leave. I looked up his account just for the lulz after a few days. It was full of poorly drawn Sonic P, but also a new pic that had a depiction of a blue Sonic kissing a pink Sonic's hand. My friend then told me it was definitely a sure thing and that I should go for it. Met a girl online. Yes, I know, but I had relatively good experiences with this before. I was very much not in the mood for a serious thing at the time either. So I met this girl and her friend at some house which they were parked outside of. I walk up to the car, and the girl looks slightly less attractive than the 2 pictures she had up. Only 2 pics on her profile and both from the same angle, normally a red flag, but frick it, I took a chance, but she doesn't seem terrible at first. So we go to a grocery store because her friend needs something. As soon as I get out of my car, her friend hits me up for gas money. I'm like WTF but kind of shrug it off anyway. Maybe her friend is just nuts. The girl I'm supposed to be seeing gets out of the car and is a good 15 pounds heavier than she appeared to be. She's wearing pants that my grandpa would have worn when he was alive and a 2 sizes too small Mighty Morphin Power Rangers jacket. At this point, I'm starting to prepare for an emergency evac cause this is going downhill fast. As we walk into the store, I am getting sudden terrible whiffs of BO. I realize in horror that they're coming from her. Keep in mind we're outside. The wind is blowing. All of her clothes are on and I can still smell her funk. Now imagine the smell when this chick takes her pants off for sexy time. No thanks. So now I know I need to bail. I feign interest in whatever the heck she was talking about while I figure out an escape route. As I actually make real eye contact with her for the first time, I realize she also has a lazy eye. WTF. So I go to the bathroom in the grocery store and call my friend. I tell him to call me in no less than 10 minutes and tell me I am supposed to be at a party he's hosting within the hour because I'd promised I'd help set up. The stinky girl gets in my car and finally my phone rings. We play out the whole thing yada yada yada. Oh so sorry. I promised I'd be there. Sucks to cut this short etc, so she asks if I can give her a ride to where she's staying. Gladly. So the whole drive there, she tells me this story about how she stabbed a girl in high school because she dumped a good friend of hers or something. I was beginning to wonder if this girl was intentionally trying to make me as uncomfortable as humanly possible. Never again. Haha, nice job with getting the frick out of there. Seems like no one in this thread has the balls to leave a crappy date. Gentlemen, what is an absolute red flag a woman can raise on the first date? My brother was in the army when he was set up on a blind date by a friend's girlfriend. Apparently during the first 10 minutes of dinner she was talking about how she would be such a great and loyal army wife, and how she thought army wives were so brave and admirable and how she would never leave him if he was injured. He had literally just met this girl. He stuck it out through dinner, faked sick and left. She pursued him pretty hard after, but he lied and told her he decided he wasn't really over his ex and wasn't ready for a relationship. He said about a month later she tried to text him with a booty call, and said she even tried to sweeten the deal by saying he didn't need to wear protection because she was on birth control. Like how many red flags can one girl have? This takes me back to the early 20s version of me and a fine lass named Rebecca. We met at a New Year's party. She tall and artsy with some feather arrangement in her hair I complimented. Ooh, a midnight and a proper kiss on the cheek with the promise of a first date to start 1991. Picked her up for said date a few days later and same hair treatment. She tells me she's obsessed with birds and always wears a feather somewhere. Okay, no problem. She's still cute in full light and this just makes her quirky, right? I was just a few years older and we went to a really nice Italian place near DC. She remarks how nice to be out with a grown-up, but she's finishing college and has been dating boys. Nice. Dinner's great until dessert. The whipped cream on mine reminds her of her last boyfriend. She then tells me in great detail how she stalked him, hiding in bushes near his house to spy, effing with his tires and covering his entire car in whipped cream and eggs. Isn't that just the funnest? Check, please. Are you sure she wasn't actually a bird? I went to meet a woman from an online dating site and at the last minute she texted to ask if I could swing by her house, which was only a few blocks away from the Starbucks we were supposed to meet at. That should have been a tip-off in retrospect, but we chatted a lot online so I felt comfortable enough. Maybe she just needed a lift or something. Instead, I come up to her house and when she opens the door, she is wearing an ankle bracelet. She begs me to please understand how she didn't want to mention it on the dating site and to please hear her out. I was naturally uncomfortable by this point but also curious, so I sat down for a few minutes in her living room. She told me of this domestic dispute she had with her ex that had turned violent and now she was on 30 days house arrest. A very overweight teenage girl came into the room at this point, and the woman said, "Oh yeah, I also forget to mention I come with this." Now I just wanted to get the heck out of there. I started making excuses to leave but she kept trying to get me to stay. Please, just one date after I am done with house arrest. The things I could learn from a man of your smarts. I said nothing besides I really have to go. Well, think about it. I just walked out the door and she followed, explaining that the bracelet had a range of several feet outside. I was rummaging for my car keys next to my car when she grabbed my left hand and slid it under her shirt, placing it directly on her bare breast. She looked up at me with a wicked grin. I got in the car without a word and just drove. I never felt so happy to drive away from a place in my life. So yay. Asking me about red flags may not be a great idea, though hopefully I have wised up since then. Asking if you have ever done H and would like to shoot up later, unless you do want to shoot up later. Same for doing lines of coke. Had dinner with a blind date. Only saw her eyes maybe for 3 minutes before she was glued to her Instagram and Snapchat, giggling to herself and replying to her followers. Tried to have a decent convo, but she was like, "Aha, that's cool." Waitress comes. She doesn't even bother looking at the menu. Steak, fries, and a glass of champagne. Then out of the blue, "How much money do you make?" I got up, told her the date was done and left her at the restaurant. She was so glued to her phone, she just nodded. She blows up my phone raging that I was supposed to buy her dinner and exclaimed she had no money or ride to get back to her man's place. So yeah, she was fishing for free food and drinks. You made it out perfectly. Congrats on you. Oh boy, here we go. Long story short, I went on a date with a chick and we were vibing really well before she turned ice cold and began acting like a bee. At that point I just wasn't enjoying it, so I made up some excuse about having some stuff to do and left. Few hours later she texts me she was disappointed that I gave up so easy and she was testing how much I liked her. Needless to say, I didn't ask her on a second date. I'd rather be single celibate than have a relationship sex with the entire cast of Mean Girls crammed into a single person with the maturity of a high school freshman. She asked me to drive her back home to ensure she hadn't left her iron on. 20 years later I'm still checking that she's locked doors, turned things off, locked up the pets, etc. That's a long time to stalk somebody. She brings a guy from Tinder to the date. His name is Craig. He uses a paper clip as an earring. He spends most of the date sewing. Still wasn't the worst date I've ever had. So now I wanna hear about the worst date. A girl I dated was really obsessive over her ex, but not like wanting to get back with him. No, good sir. She just wanted to make sure he didn't date anyone and would force everyone around her to help her, including me. I found out from her ex, a really nice guy, that on the first date we went on, she chose a specific restaurant because he had a date, and she wanted to ruin it. Yikes. Your well-meaning co-worker sets you up on a blind date with her fun friend. You agree to meet at a bar, but then her friend asks you to pick her up because she lost her license. You get to her apartment and she is arguing with a man out front. She flips him the bird before spitting in his face, then gets into your car. It is at this crucial point you notice she brought a suitcase full of her things. After you finish the drink you ordered with your meal, she finishes her 5th one. The entire time you haven't said more than a few words. Not because you're being indifferent, but because she always interrupts with anecdotes about her abusive childhood. The bill comes. She slides it over to you. She informs you that she doesn't have any money and assumed you had intended to pay for the entire date. On the way to the car she informs you that she wants to have unprotected sex. Don't worry though. She tells you that you cannot impregnate her. She is already carrying another man's child. While taking her home she begins gesturing to her suitcase while asking to live with you a few weeks. She is broke and destitute till she begins her new job as a stripper on Monday. The man she was arguing with was letting her stay with him till she saved up enough money for her own place. Unfortunately that man had kicked her out since she was bringing other men over to his apartment to frick. In her opinion it was unfair. After all, she never agreed to only be sleeping with him exclusively. After pulling her hand out of your crotch and telling her you're not interested, you get to the apartment you picked her up from. Unfortunately you live in the same apartment complex, only a couple buildings around the corner. Far enough from where you park but not so far that she doesn't follow you all the way to your front door. She sexually assaults you while trying to force her way into the apartment. You panic, but then hear your cell phone ring. It's a telemarketer telling you about your vehicle's expiring extended warranty. You pretend it's work, push your way outside, lock the door and hope she forgets the number scrolling across it. She follows you to your car, asking when you will come back home. You leave her standing in the rear view mirror while you speed off into the night. You then spend a few hours sitting in the mall parking lot, waiting for a chance to sneak back home. While on your 3rd cigarette to deal with the 2nd anxiety attack. Even though you previously quit smoking for over 1 year, you come to a grand realization. Your co-worker is kind of a bee. Apologies for the awful experience, but congratulations on the compelling narrative. I hope you don't mind, but I couldn't find a babysitter and brought my kid. Yes I do mind. You could have rescheduled. This is supposed to be a date, not a future daddy test. Here's some money for you and the kid to have a nice dinner. Bye. Yes, also lying about having kids and having know when you are at her place. When she gets too personal and wants to know the street you grew up on, your first dog's name, what your first car was, where you went to school, mother's maiden name, the 3 wacky numbers on the back of your credit card. Making comments to imply that she wants a worshipper gift giver instead of a partner. If you don't see her so as an equal, it's a bad sign. Pay pig. There are a few. One, she never bothers to engage in small talk during the date at all and any attempt on your part is only met with single word answers. Another would be if she kept talking about her ex during the date. Lastly, she answers her phone saying hey dad this isn't a good time, but you quickly notice the name on the call display oddly matches the name of your own father who disappeared when you were little. Accidental incest. She will raise a big red flag if she treats strangers like crap. You can tell a great deal about somebody by how they treat people who have no material benefits to them. Super underrated observation. I actually have a go-to business restaurant bar where I know the staff very well. They give me tons of info on how potential business associates treated them, and it is about 90% predictive of what they are truly like to deal with down the road. Automatically ordering the most expensive thing on the menu if they are not splitting the bill. Not treating waitstaff with respect. Not trying to maintain eye contact, while not being socially awkward. This one is context dependent. Constant use of their phone. Grossly bashing their ex. Or talking at length about them. Not the normal oh, my ex was a dong, but really going on about it. Being generally inconsiderate or arrogant. Diverting conversation to talk overly about themselves, even on topics not about them. Not showing any interest in me as a person. My ex and I used to split all our bills and we went on twice as many dates. When every time you bring a girl out is a financial burden, you start to resent spending time with someone. If she starts playing on her phone, that means A. She's just there for a free meal. B. She's already dating someone. C. She's not interested in you. D. All of the above. Apart from all the usual ones, I really know it's not going to work if they start complaining about having to walk a short way when together. I get it if they're wearing heels, but if we plan to go to a restaurant, walk around a bit, then see a movie, and 200 meters into the walking they start complaining, then it's just not going to work out. I dated a girl once who would get mad if I wouldn't circle around or wait until one of the closest spots were open. Her dad would do it all the time. I happen to be one of those people who park as far away as possible so my car doesn't get dinged by careless kids. It didn't work well. Telling you right at the beginning of a date how much he hates Martin Luther King Jr. Yeah, that was awkward. Talking about how they want a man who knows how to treat a lady, or checking out other guys with their eyes while still actually talking to you, or ridiculing things you said, or telling you their ex-boyfriend is a policeman and if anyone hurts me he will get them, or telling you they have a BF but he's going to be in jail for 6 months, or ordering as much expensive stuff as they can, obviously more than they can eat, because they think a date is a chance to burn a guy for as much as they can get, or telling you about how their ex was an butthole, in fact all their exes were buttholes, or lying about their sprints or age before a blind date, or some of the first questions they ask you are how much do you earn, what car do you drive, where do you live, do you own or rent, or telling you their last BF was so generous he even bought you a house and gave it to you. 9 Korean girl in China, receiving more than a dozen calls on her phone, mostly that sounded male, while still in the car on the way to the restaurant. Chinese girl, I'd already decided not to date her again before we reached the restaurant. These are all things I have personally experienced dating. Yikes. Came to this thread afraid I'd see something I'm inadvertently doing as a red flag because I can be a little socially awkward. Leaving this thread feeling more normal than ever. Holy crap guys, I'm sorry you're meeting these women. All I see here is a green flag. Trying to make sure you aren't a bad person or trying to improve yourself. There are some good ones here, like mistreating servers, making it clear she sees you as a source of money and expensive gifts, or carrying on about an ex. I don't want to just repeat what everyone else is saying, so my red flag is anyone who seems to be constantly on or have something they're trying to prove. If they can't just relax and stop trying to show what an edgelord victim not like other girls or whatever sort of character they're trying to convince you they are, being around them is going to drain you every time. It's not even worth the pee to me. I like genuine, real people who aren't constantly putting on some show. I want a man who treats me like a queen. Usually code for I want someone to live and die for my happiness so I can be selfish forever. No thanks. When you're dating a girl for a few months who has a small appetite but over time you've realized her stomach is increasing in size. Finally you make a joke and she breaks down crying saying she was raped and really needs you. So, being nice and understanding you stay with her because you feel you can raise a child and willing enough to do anything it takes. Until you bring it up to a mutual friend and he refuses to look at you. You begin pestering him about it until he spills the beans and reveals she cheated on you in the beginning of the relationship because she thought you guys wouldn't last long and she is going to use the baby as leverage to keep both of you together and use you for life. You get to her house, tell her everything you know and all she can say is, "Who told you?" In the end you leave her and all of her friends, questioning your entire existence. The next year you meet a wonderful girl by chance and have now been going strong for 2 years. That's a really long first date. In all seriousness though, that's a terrible ordeal and it sounds like it's really affected you. Counseling therapy might not be a bad idea if there's lingering bitterness. I was expecting subtle hints coming here, but instead I feel fortunate I've apparently managed to avoid absolute train wrecks. A few weeks into dating my first real girlfriend, things started to turn weird. She started telling me that she was hanging out at an old friend's place but one of his buddies was hitting on her hardcore. I told her to just walk away but she kept making up excuses that they were all in a room together and she couldn't leave. I told her to tell him she had a boyfriend who wants him to back off and she told me he started threatening me. She kept asking me what I wanted to say to him but I just sort of brushed it all off because this was a conversation through a third party with someone I had never met before. Situations like this kept popping up. She would tell me she was around some guy who was being aggressive towards her, trying to get me to react. I kept trying to act tough to these random people. 15 years old, but really I was just confused. After about a month of dating, she tells me that best friend's boyfriend texted her and said that he loves her and that they should run away together. We all went to the same high school, so I don't really know where they plan to run to. She was relaying all of this to me and I started to question it. He was such a nice guy, why would he want to break off his relationship? Why is this conversation even continuing? Why is he persisting? Have you told him you're not interested? Shouldn't you be able to easily shut this down? She gets frustrated that I'm not playing into her hand, so she calls me and decides to escalate it to, well, I'm kind of considering it. That was obviously the breaking point and a very easy response. Really? Well, then we should break up. She flips her opinion really quickly. I didn't mean it. I was crazy. I'm sorry. I don't even like him. I'm proud of 15-year-old me for sticking up for myself and completely cutting contact. It turns out, which is pretty obvious in hindsight, that she just loved guys getting jealous over her and was lying the entire time to get me going. In every relationship I've had since, I've kept an eye out for the every guy I talk to is into me red flag. You are a champ. I had similar experience at 17. Unfortunately, I was far more naive then. Bringing up crazy things she did to guys in past relationships. It doesn't make me think you're savage or cool, it makes me think that's going to happen to me. I opened the restaurant door for her, and she told me I don't need a freaking man to open my door. I walked her to the table. I gave her $20 for a cab ride home and walked out. I would have just bailed. Frick the cab money, you're a better man than me. When they ask you to pay for something for them, or suggest that you do it for the next time. Went out with a girl for a really bad date. There was almost zero chemistry between us. Things got slightly better as the date progressed, but I still wouldn't even say it was in my top 100 dates, and I don't think I've ever had that many. I offer to drop her off on our way out and she agrees. On the way to her place, we saw an ad for The Incredibles 2, and to strike up a conversation I asked her if she liked those films. She said she did, and then said that we should go see it next time we go out. Then she added, but you'll pay for my ticket. Right, I laughed and didn't say anything because I assumed she was joking, and she said with a serious tone, don't be cheap. You got a nice car, it's clear you make good money. You can afford to pay for my ticket. She was out of my sights the second she said that. I just laughed again and said sure, we can do that. I dropped her off and never contacted her again. For my husband. Tell them to read this in the most redneck, hick voice possible. When a girl who looks like someone just pee in her oatmeal keeps calling Angry Orchard Green Orchid, gets mad at the bartender by saying I done got one of these last week. It was a green orchid, and then turns to you and says wanna fist me later. I also like anal. Personally, I disagree with my husband and believe this is a magnetic and appropriate way to exert one's dominance. And now he's telling me about her claim to be from a parallel universe that her pastor explained to her. Never mind. Shut it down. I went on a date with a girl who ordered a steak and a cheesecake and then proceeded to eat them at the same time, like in the same bite. Look, I get weird food combinations, but if you're going to make that combination on the first date, there's a strong chance you have some bodies under your floorboards. That almost sounds good. Might have to try that. Not a first date, but my ex broke up with me because I wasn't putting enough into the relationship. I didn't buy her a 4-month anniversary present, then begged to get back together with me, and continued to complain that I didn't buy her things. Excuse me, lady, but I just found out my cat is ill and need to pay for her meds. Presents can wait. I'm so glad that relationship is over. I remember a very long time ago when I was like 19. I'm 44 now. I met this chick who was working at a store, Thrifties, that I was transferred to for a week to help them out from a neighboring city. I was working for the same store. We hit it off while we were working that night, and long story short, went out after work to a restaurant, Coco's. While we were eating, some dude walks up to our table and starts to ask her why she didn't pick up their kid since it was her turn to watch him. They start yelling at each other right there at the restaurant. Then the guy leaves, grabs their kid from his car, I'm assuming it was his car, I actually don't know, and plops him next to her in the booth while we were eating and left. I was polite and finished the meal and then said I had to go home. It was so awkward. The next day I had to go into work at that same store, but she wasn't working that day, so I didn't see her. I ended up working one more day after that and still didn't see her, so I went back to my store after that and didn't contact her. 1 week goes by and she ends up calling me at work, since cell phones were not a thing back then, and begs me to have breakfast with her so she can explain things. I have no idea why, but I ended up saying yes and met her the following Saturday in her city at some breakfast place. I show up at the restaurant and she is sitting there with her mother and grandmother. The girl then begins to apologize to me for what happened. She's crying and begging me for a second chance, while at the same time her mother and grandmother were begging me to give her a second chance to BTW. I have never met before and I literally just met her. I can't remember the exact details of what happened at the end of that breakfast, but I never saw her again. I thought I was in the Twilight Zone. Still to this day I always wonder how that dude knew we were at the restaurant, since no one had cell phones back then. She asked me to take her shopping on our second date. I have my dad drop us off. Didn't have my license at the time. Age 15. So anyways, she takes me to Victoria's Secret to shop for clothes and stuff. About an hour later and a half later she thinks she has enough things and asks me to help take her things to go check out at the counter. I grab the rest of her things and take them over to the counter to pay. That's when she just kinda stands there and acts like I'm gonna pay. I said something like, "How this is gonna be expensive. Where do you work?" And she says something like, "What do you mean? I thought you were helping me out with this." I kinda just asked if she was joking, and when she confirmed multiple times that she wasn't, she claimed it's not okay to make the lady in a relationship happy or some bulls. First of all, we went on one date-ish, movies, and now today, this is not a relationship. Second of all, I'm 15. I don't have $150 to waste on clothes for someone I've spent all of maybe 6 hours of my life on. I keep refusing to pay, mostly saying that I don't have the money to pay in the first place, even if I wanted to. She calls her dad and has him pick her up instead of waiting for mine. Praying my date next weekend doesn't go the next way. I've only dated 2 people before and she was the first. I don't think this girl is the same way as the last at all though, so I think we'll work out. Once started dating this gal who shared everything with me, from her dog that she had to take care of for the last year and a half because he was dying, to the sexual trauma that she had been through, to her birth control that was suffering side effects from, to how much it's going to cost to fix her car. Nothing positive was being shared, and all the bad stuff she was kinda brushing over like it still wasn't the worst she'd been through. I had to ghost her because I'm a bleeding heart and even I couldn't help but want to try to fix her problems. But I had enough problems of my own to deal with that. Is married, gets drunk before telling you, and during the dinner date orders a second dinner to go. I told her she is paying for the meal. Went on a date with a girl I met on OkCupid. I picked her up since she didn't have a car. It was 40 minutes to get to her place. She wasn't anything that she looked like in her pictures and she is very much not my type, but I figured, you know what, I'll give her a chance, who knows. She suggests that we go to Dennis because it had the best breakfast. Definitely doesn't BTW. We sit down and try and have conversation, but here are the topics she wants to talk about. Dang, our server is so hot. I love girls with big asses. X2 this happened. I went on a date with the submissive guy before you and he was so cute, but like war into me and I just didn't feel the same. You know, isn't it weird how many black people are here? She was black. I'm white. Welp. Check comes on a single piece of paper and she asks how much is it, so I show her the receipt and she proceeds to go into her purse to get money out. Now look, my view is if I ask you to the date, I'll pay. If you want to pay for yourself, I have great respect for you. However, I feel that on the few occasions that I do pay for you, it makes it more meaningful since you weren't expecting it. So, she's at the point where she's just pulling out change, and I'm thinking, you know what? It's only like $20. I'll pay for her. Even though I really didn't enjoy this date, I tell her I can pay for you. It's no big deal. but she's insistent on paying her share. I literally cannot convince her to save her own money. So we get up to the counter to pay and she seems apathetic, no longer interested in talking to me. So once we get out of Denny's I ask, hey, are you alright? You seem indifferent. She says yeah, it's just I hate the rain. It wasn't even raining. Driving nowhere really, and I ask what she wants to do. She still looks blank and says not really anything. Just want to go home. I want to keep hanging with her to see if I can make her feel better. So I throw out ideas like going to the mall, movies, bowling. She says no to all, just wants to go home. Okay, here is the major red flag. I'm driving her home and about 3-4 minutes of dead silence she says okay, so I'm going to be honest with you. The reason why I'm upset is because you made me pay for myself. What? I explained that she was giving me signs of not wanting me to pay for her and I respected her decision to pay for herself. Then she rambles on about how unfair she's treated and I'm just giving her the silent treatment. We get to her house and I crap you not. She looks at me and says, so, do you want to come inside for a while? I dead but look at her and say I'm sorry, but no. She walks off inside. I drive home and she's blocked me. It was my first date ever. We were in a bar that was having a cover band event. She went to get some drinks as I kept the table and comes back chatting to a guy. Seems to be her friend, but after talking to him for a while, it was her boyfriend. That was just back from a trip. He even had his travel bag with him. He was such a great guy. We even maintained contact for a while, and after they broke up, I told him about that day. Late to the party, but here goes. I messaged a girl a couple of times on a dating app and never heard from her again, so I thought that was the end of it. About 2 weeks later she randomly answers saying sorry for not responding, but she was in a car crash and blah blah. Even sent me a picture of a crashed car. This set off some alarms, but I figure frick it. So we chatted a bit and she wanted to meet up to smoke some weed and she was cute, so I figured why not. I arrive at her place and she gets in the car muttering something about her roommate taking a poop in the toilet and having a conversation with her while she's in the shower. Ooh, look. As we are driving to her spot to smoke, she starts telling me about the car crash and how it was a drunk driver that hit her and how my dad is a Hell's Angel, so he'll just get my dad and his buddies to pay him a visit. Excuse me was all I said, and she repeated what she just said, this time implying some broken bones would be made and that she might even get her dad's Hell's Angel lore to sue him as well. Now at this point we have started smoking, so I was wondering if I was hearing her right. So I asked a Hell's Angel lawyer and she freaking snapped back, that's what I just said. So needless to say she was freaking me out major by this time, and I kept looking in my rearview mirror half expecting to see her dad on his bike swinging a chain above his head. But nothing. She said some other crazy crap about working 4 jobs and that all of them were linked to the Hells Angels in some way, so after about 40 minutes of smoke and hearing all her Hells Angels stories, I politely took her home and my excuse was I had to be up early. I dropped her off and said it was nice meeting you with a smile and a wave. I cannot tell you how happy I was after I drove off. In fact, I was so happy to be away from the potential biker gang daughter that I started laughing my butt off. Full on maniacal laughter. Just pure joy kind of laughing. I'll never forget how happy that laugh was, knowing I was going home to just my cat and not some crazy biker chick. Made me really appreciate being single for a while. Sweet lord. Waiters, what dating disasters have you witnessed? I was bartending at a restaurant in San Francisco. This guy came in and ordered a vodka martini. He downed it and ordered another. Halfway through his third he called his wife and asked for a divorce. After he hung up we talked about the Red Sox. I'm from Boston. I was bartender at a country club in college and I watched a woman curse her husband out at their table because the husband kept flirting with the waitress. She got really loud and walked out. Keep in mind this was a nice restaurant at an upscale country club. The waitress felt it was all her fault, but she told me the guy had been coming in there often and tipping her 100% of the bill every time. I feel horrible because I'd never remember everyone who worked at mine's name, but they had to always remember mine. They really do flirt with you though, and they would hire the prettiest girls they could find. Drinking at a country club was a mess. They don't cut you off and you can order whatever you want. I worked briefly as a waiter at a semi-nice place near me. I had a couple come in for a date who we've seen there a few times before. I think it was their regular dating place. She was very clearly sad, and was talking about how her uncle was really sick and was probably going to pass away soon. He decided to pull out the ring and pop the question anyway. Seriously, dude, read the room. Okay, here's a great story that I've been wanting to share. I work at a small bakery in my town. I am general kitchen staff, and not a waiter, but I was there when this all went down. It was around 2 in the afternoon. The day had been normal, but suddenly I saw the retail staff in a huddle and took my first opportunity to go see what was happening. Apparently a couple had come in on this summer day, ordered 2 bowls of soup and sat down. The girl that took their order went to the back and prepared their soup for them, then brought it back out. In the time it took for her to get the soup, the woman had taken off her flip-flop, put her leg across the table, and the guy was going to town sucking on this lady's toes in the middle of the restaurant. The waitress didn't notice until she went to place the soup on the table. She stood there in shock, and the couple was oblivious to her presence. This guy is going all in, and the lady is starting to moan by the time they realize their soup is ready. The waitress was in complete shock for the rest of her shift, and that couple is no longer allowed on the premises. This place has even more weird stories. From someone forcing open the back door to ask for a hamburger to a complete stranger coming out of the basement and acting like he's supposed to be there. Not to mention the time I watched a bird fly out of a hole in the ceiling. Kentucky can be a weird place. I worked at a bar in a hotel for 5 years. I had a table come down from their hotel room and sit at one of my pub tables for dinner. From the moment they sat down, you could tell the wife was furious about something. She was unbelievably pleasant toward me, but did not say a single word to the man at the table. I get their drinks and then their orders. He ordered steak and she ordered the sauciest pasta dish we had on the menu. About 20 minutes later, the wife still hadn't said a word to the man since they sat down. Their food was done and my food runner set it on the table. Right as I was about to walk over to see if they needed anything else, I saw the woman stand up, say go frick yourself, John, as she picked up the plate of pasta and dumped it all over his head and down into his lap. Then she very calmly walked out of the bar and back up to her hotel room. I spent a few minutes helping the man clean up and got my manager to come handle the situation from there, as it was way above my pay grade at that point. Later in the night, the woman came back to the bar without the man and we talked for a while. Turns out he admitted to cheating on her right before their dinner reservation. I never saw either of them again. Bartender here. A couple on a blind date took their seats directly across from the dishwasher, so I had to pretend I couldn't hear him. 40 plus, balding, overweight, and drunk. Asking her, 30 plus, pretty, friendly, and level-headed. Listen, I see you over there, just amazing and gorgeous, and I'm wondering what you're seeing in me. What do you think? She smiled, cringed, and made an effort to sidestep his questions and change the subjects at least 3 times, while he ordered shots of Fireball at an upscale establishment. For both of them, she would politely refuse, and he would end up drinking both of them. He didn't seem to be big on learning. Fireball, the drink of upscale establishments and Carnival cruise lines. I used to work at a bar where 70% of the customers were on Tinder dates. There was a line of 2-person booths along the wall when you first walk in. There were 2 dudes sitting by themselves in 2 different booths. Both of them were facing the door. One was in the first booth, one was in the last booth. This girl comes in and walks up to the first booth, says hi to the guy, and sits down. They are chatting for about 5 minutes when the other guy, who is sitting by himself, comes up to her and says, "Hey, I'm so and so. Aren't you so and so?" They all talk for like 30 seconds and she gets up and goes and sits with the other guy at the last booth. Eventually a different girl shows up for a date with the guy at the first booth. I don't know exactly what happened, but I almost died watching it unfold. She was definitely embarrassed. Oh man, I am really bad at remembering faces. Walking into a restaurant for a first or second date and not being able to remember what the person looks like is such a nightmare. I'm married now, so I'm saved from the heck that is dating. I worked fine dining in Vail, Colorado. I once saw a lady throw red wine all over a guy's shirt and leave. He sat and continued eating his spaghetti plate. No fricks. Shirt's already ruined. Now he doesn't even have to be careful with the spaghetti. A couple of friends and I went to the Mexican restaurant where another friend was waiting tables. There was a couple kind of catty-cornered from us that had a bit of an off vibe. We could see them, but not really hear them. So we asked our server friend what was up. She said it seemed to be a first or second date that was a bit awkward. The girl had ordered one of those enormous margaritas and was not sharing it. I had to go make a phone call back in the payphone days, and when I came back, I ended up sitting with my back to the couple. Maybe 10 minutes later, I hear our friend the server say, no, and the sound of a full punch bowl being emptied from a great height. Giant margarita girl had stood up, swayed a bit, and vomited all over their meals, table, and the surrounding floor. The restaurant calmed everyone sitting nearby, and the girl's date abandoned her in the ensuing chaos. Bit off topic, but I'm a waiter and you've just made me realize I've not had to clear up vomit in over a month thanks to the lockdown. There is nothing worse than trying to get vomit out of the crevices in a chair. This happened to a friend of my wife. She met a guy on a dating site. They agreed to meet at a strip mall parking lot and go to dinner together from there. He asks if he can drive her car, because it's a Camaro and he's never driven one. So they go together in her car to a restaurant a couple miles away. Dinner goes okay, nothing too crazy. Then he gets up to go to the bathroom and never comes back. After 10 minutes, she gets up to check on him, and her car is gone. He's dashed on the bill and stolen her car. She pays the bill and gets an Uber home and calls the police to report her car stolen. Turns out the guy just left it in the parking lot where they originally met and seems to think he did nothing wrong. Last I heard, he's still being charged with auto theft. I genuinely can't imagine allowing a stranger to drive my car and then leaving the keys with them the whole night. I was a waiter at a very famous upscale restaurant and a gentleman approached the matron requesting someone take pictures of him proposing to his girlfriend. Since I was the closest butthole to the matron, I was tasked with performing this duty. After stalking the table for a solid hour, the moment was inevitably approaching. I set up at an angle she couldn't see me, and when he busted out the ring I started taking as many pictures as I could. Anyone who has tried to capture a once in a lifetime moment on camera knows that you're not really watching what's going on. You're just trying to frame the moment. After about 20-30 pictures, I slowly realized that she was declining the proposal and the scene was quickly degenerating into a 5-alarm dumpster fire. However, I was far enough away that I couldn't hear what was being said and couldn't be sure of what was transpiring, so I continued taking pictures just in case. Finally, I stepped back and watched the scene unfold in reality as she stormed out of the restaurant in embarrassment and he scrambled to pay the bill and chase after her. He'd requested that I use my phone and send the best pictures to him. Needless to say, he never approached us for the pictures, and I have about 100 plus pictures of a wedding proposal gone wrong somewhere deep in my iCloud photo bank. What a sad ending to a first date. Not waiter, but I used to be a banquet cook for large corporate events weddings. Had your very typical Bridezilla one weekend. She ended getting hammered at the reception and slept with a groomsman in the honeymoon suite. Needless to say, husband left her immediately. At least I got a lot of compliments on my crab cakes. Edit. Since people have asked, crab cakes. Simple, good, backfin crab meat. Don't frick with lump. Not worth it. Cake falls apart. Make sure it Maryland blow crab or you're not an American. Raw eggs. Mustard powder. Juice and zest of a lemon. Parsley if you're fancy. None if you're not. I don't judge. Old Bay seasoning. Can you tell where I'm from yet? Just enough breadcrumbs and mayo to form a solid patty. That's it. Any more ruins the cake. DM me if you want more coherent instructions. Not a disaster, but it could have been. Guy hires private room in the very fine dining establishment I'm working in. Dinner for two. Champagne. Proposal dinner. Gives us instructions to bring the champagne. When she says yes, I jump the gun and poke my head into the room holding the champagne, just to check I haven't missed it. Guy sees me, has a panic fit and throws up all over the table. Woman is very concerned, goes over to see if he's okay. He hits frick it and pulls out the ring, drops to one knee and proposes, with vom still on him and the table. She bursts out laughing, says yes and kisses him on the head. Get them a new table in a different room and serve the champagne. MFW, I hope I find love like that one day. This was one of the purest things I've ever read. I used to bartend at a Yard House in the before times. Yard House is a corporate place that's basically a nicer sports bar with a ton of beer on tap with stupid, giant novelty glasses. I had a couple at the bar during happy hour drinking from one of the big glasses and they ordered some onion rings that were half price. He jokingly proposed with an onion ring and she started laughing and jokingly said yes. Then he busted out an actual ring. She wasn't laughing anymore. Guy 1 and GF are fondling each other at my bar. Guy 2 joins them at the bar and they quickly separate and behave. The three go off into the casino but stop back for drinks a few times. Early AM Guy 2 does a shot and walks away. I can tell he isn't happy. He comes back and says he has a couple of hours to kill before his plane leaves. We get to chatting and he tells me he just broke up with his GF as suspects she snuck up to the room and nailed his best friend when he couldn't find either of them for an hour. I ask if it was Guy 1 and GF. He confirms it and I let him know he is making the right choice as they were making out at the bar before he came down. He thanks me for confirming, leaves a huge tip, and lets me know what is happening in case there is any confusion with the hotel. An hour or so later Guy 1 and GF are at the bar whispering and arguing. I casually ask if everything is okay. They say they are locked out of their room and can't find their friend who paid for the room. They tried to charge the bill to the room too but my computer showed the room was empty. I told them Guy 2 had been in earlier but checked out and his flight was already in the air. Then I watched the meltdown. Guy 2 had paid for his BFF and GF to spend a week in Vegas with him. They cheated and got caught. He checked out and flew home and they had nowhere to stay for the week and no money for even basic food. Their luggage had been packed and left in the baggage hold. They did everything they could to get out of paying for their drinks as they were hella expensive. Left no tip and didn't have a place to sleep or even change clothing at 5 AM. TLDR. Don't cheat on the person paying your way if you can't pay your own way. Must have been pretty satisfying to leave them there. Freaking idiots. I used to work as a hostess at a thank deity it's the weekend already. Guy makes a reservation at the most booked table. It's by the window. All romantic etc. Also super visible from any other part of the restaurant. Comes in, all dressed up and with a suitcase. Strange, but okay. A few minutes later, his date arrives. They laugh, flirt. We actually thought it's an anniversary or he is going to propose or something the way it was going. Nope. Halfway through the evening she starts screaming at him. He broke up with her and actually packed her suitcase. Then paid and left her there sobbing at the table alone. We got her a brownie on the house. Because just watching that we felt freaking awful. This is the worst day of your life. Take a brownie. Not my story, but my partner just told about this happening at his work. We live in a pretty large university college and one time a guy came in with a plant for a date. He sat with it at the table, ordered it food, drinks, and dessert. He was a total gentleman to the plant. Turns out he lost a bet with his frat brothers. Bartender for a couple on a Tinder date. They talk for about an hour. He goes to the bathroom but left his jacket on the back of his chair with his wallet and keys in. She stole them, stole his car, and went shopping. That poor schmuck refused to call the cops for an hour because it was going so well. I felt bad for him. And this proves me right to take my wallet and keys everywhere with me. Frick you Jessica, I'm not paranoid. I, 22M at the time, was busboy at a 200-seat restaurant that was part of a sporting club. I'd been there for long enough to have a feel for the personalities of the customers. On this particular night one of my tables was a first date. The girl was lovely, all smiles and very pleasant. The guy was sort of normal, seemed a bit quiet. He put off some fairly clear signals that he would prefer to be left alone though. That's okay, some prefer minimal service. What I did notice though, was that the guy was talking to her quietly, bit forcefully, and almost non-stop, sometimes gripping her arm firmly, in a way that suggested that she wouldn't be able to pull away easily. I couldn't hear a word that was said, but the lady was looking more and more terrified all the time. Like, nearly about to wet herself terrified. A complete change from her pleasant nature when they had walked in. I told the waitress on the adjacent section that I wasn't sure about what was going on and asked if she wouldn't mind checking on the table to let me know her thoughts. Waitress went to the table, said a few quick words and came back to me. Out of earshot, she said, "Yeah, I think we have to get her out of here." We let the manageress know what was going on. The guy had booked his table. Good, we had his name. Outside at the taxi rank, by some miracle, there was a female cabbie in the line. I ignored the protests of the other drivers. I hopped in and told the cabbie the situation and offered her $20 to wait around the back of the restaurant. I said, "Please don't wait for a destination, just drive. Something's really wrong with her date." The cabbie didn't need the $20. We had a front desk call the guy over the PA for an urgent call. This would delay him while they tried to figure what the call was, and then realizing that he had actually won a meat tray. They were raffled off at various intervals through the night. "Just wait here while we fetch it for you." As soon as creepy guy was out of sight, I asked his date if she needed to get out of here. She just trembled and nodded, figuring that she probably wasn't in the mood to trust her male at that point. My waitress friend escorted her through the kitchen and out to the waiting cab where she slipped away quick as you please. The guy came back to an empty table, and staff seeming to be oblivious to where his lady friend had gone. We didn't get much of the story, other than that the lady was set up on a blind date by a mutual friend who told her that this guy was okay. Way to go, team. Good on all of you for intervening. I kept my interaction with the table brief, but I'll never forget the time I had a couple come in and as I was setting down the entree the lady looked at her man stone cold, pointed to his phone and said, "So who this hoe you been texting?" Me. Of course, neither being the hoe nor texter in question made definite haste away from that conversation. I do remember her asking to split the bill at the register though. Couples fight in restaurants a lot. That or maybe they argue everywhere. I couldn't say. I worked as a waiter for years and I could not begin to count the number of arguments I saw, but one guy comes to mind above all of them. This guy must have been 50-60 years old and got angry with his lady. He actually threw a snit and stomped off and was wandering around the restaurant and looking back at her and scowling. It was like a child throwing a temper tantrum, but most children aren't even this dramatic usually. It was nauseating to watch. Not a waiter, but I saw a first date next to me. In short, girl states she has an allergy to pineapple. Guy says okay and I don't believe you kinda way. At some point he scraped some pineapple glaze off his dessert and onto her spoon when she popped outside to make a call. She comes back and eats without noticing too much. Has a severe reaction. Guy freaks out and tries to run but gets stopped by my girlfriend who is suspicious of him. Manager administers the girl's EpiPen and ambulance and police are called. Absolute clusterfuck situation. I watched a proposal in the dining room of the hotel I worked at. Everyone was eagerly awaiting the dessert and ring box to be brought out. She saw the box and just started saying no 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 no, and told the crushed groom, "We need to talk." People who initially were clapping just slowed to a dead silence. She ended up going back to the room, collecting her things and leaving, while he cried at the table for a few minutes. It was super depressing for all the staff, guests and that poor guy. And this is why you shouldn't propose unless you already know the person will say yes. Don't assume they will. Have an adult conversation about future and ask after they have made it clear they will not be telling you no. I remember serving one night, and this strange guy came in to sit at the bar. He was a little disheveled with an unkempt beard. He had trouble speaking, and he just generally seemed like someone you might imagine had difficulty socially or with dating. He had brought a bag in with him, and after he sat down, he pulled out a picture of a woman. He stood the picture up on the counter, in front of the chair beside him, and he ordered 2 drinks and his meal. One drink was for the woman, and it ended up going untouched. A lot of my coworkers saw it and laughed about it in the kitchen. They thought it was the most pathetic thing they'd ever witnessed. I thought something was a little off about the scene though, or that there was more to it than my coworkers were giving it credit for. He didn't strike me as a desperate loner. There was an air of sadness around him, but not because he was pathetic. It felt more like grief. I talked to the bartender about it later, who actually knew the man. Apparently his wife had just passed, and this restaurant was where they went on their first date together years ago. His wife was the woman in the photo, and he came into the restaurant to share one last drink with her. Incredible. What a story. What a beautiful, painful thing to witness, and what a sweet gesture of the husband to connect with his wife. AWW, this got me. I was a waiter at a pretty high-end hotel restaurant. It was about 3 PM and I was the only one on the floor as it was normally very slow at the time. There was only one party seated and it was a middle-aged man and woman. You could tell they weren't married. I went over and asked if they wanted anything to drink and they both got mimosas, I think. I went back with their drinks and asked if they were also planning on ordering food. They said yes, but that they're in no rush and will let me know when they were ready to order. About 15 minutes goes by when this man shows up at the front desk, starts looking around, yells I freaking knew it, UB, and starts walking towards the couple sitting down. The woman stands up and the guy remained seated. It became clear that the woman was having an affair with another man, and the husband came in to confront them. He grabbed her hand and walked her out, but not before telling the man to stay the frick away from my wife. The man remains seated at the table, turns to me and waves me over. I go over and he says in a perfectly calm tone, "Cobb salad please." Not a waiter, but once witnessed a woman ghost her date at the end of the night. It was a fancy jazz club, and the couple racked up what I assume was at least a $500 bill. There was a ton of wine and they went through a few expensive entrees. When it came time to pay, the woman snuck out while the man was in the bathroom and just disappeared. The dude was distraught. I'm a waitress in my father's restaurant. It's not that big, but we're usually full during weekends. A lot of couple come here cause it's kinda chic for a French restaurant. Anyway, once there was a couple, early 30s. The dude arrived earlier than the girl, so although it was something like a date but number, the girl ordered everything. She chose all the dishes, the dessert and even the wine without even asking the guy what he would like to have. They both didn't talk, only said good evening, weird for a date. But when I came at their table to serve the wine, they started to argue about their relationship. The dude was convinced that she cheated on him, and you know what? She admitted that and said very loud that he was bad in bed. At this moment any single cell in my body was cringing. They kept arguing for 10 minutes until I decided to stop them, cause they were almost yelling and so disturbing the 15 people in the restaurant. The woman asked if she could have another bottle of wine, and she left within 5 minutes with the bottle. I felt so bad for this guy that I gifted him his whiskey coca. Jeez, poor guy. I once had a couple that I didn't realize was a couple, and once they were done with their meal I asked if they would like separate checks because I honestly thought the woman was the man's mother, and they looked at me with confused, offended expressions and replied with "One check please." They are now regulars who come in almost every week and despise me. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.